आई एम श्योर हम सबको म्यूचुअल फंड्स के बारे में क्यूरियोसिटी होगी, मनी साइकोलॉजी के बारे में क्यूरियोसिटी होगी। आज यही सब टॉपिक्स पे डिस्कस करने के लिए मेरे साथ प्रेजेंट है मिस लीजा बार्बोरा। शी हैज बीन इन द इंडस्ट्री ऑफ पर्सनल फाइनेंस सिंस द लास्ट 20 years.
Even for me, the real eye-opener was when the shift happened towards understanding the emotions behind money. You know, the missing pieces started to fall in place. हम लोग सीधा प्रोडक्ट पे चले जाते हैं, क्या खरीदना है, कहाँ इन्वेस्ट करना है. Product is the last part of the puzzle. Idea was to get people to think about the other things around why you should be investing, how you should think about different assets.
What was the myth that you saw the most, या कौन सी misconception थे जो आपने सबसे ज़्यादा observe की अपने candidates में?
Misconception, I think हम लोग वी आर अफ्रेड कि रिस्क नहीं लेना चाहिए. अगर आप कैलकुलेटेड रिस्क नहीं लोगे देन यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू ग्रो योर वेल्थ.
इनफैक्ट मैंने कुछ एंडोमेंट पॉलिसीज के रिटर्न्स निकाले थे कि कितना IRR बन रहा है. इट इज कमिंग ओनली 5%, 6% मैक्स, उससे ज़्यादा नहीं मिलता. जबकि इंडिया का इन्फ्लेशन ही 7% रह चुका है.
What you're not understanding is that what you cannot see, inflation has eaten up the value of your money.
You know, there are so many females I know जो non-finance के हैं. How can they start their basic financial learning? आजकल में एक बहुत ही ट्रेंडिंग टॉपिक चल रहा है. How can we reach our first 1 crore with the help of mutual funds? Hey everyone, hi, this is Zeel Doshi Thakkar and I welcome you all on this podcast with Investing with Dhan. माई डियर ऑडियंस, आई एम श्योर हम सबको म्यूचुअल फंड्स के बारे में क्यूरियोसिटी होगी, मनी साइकोलॉजी के बारे में क्यूरियोसिटी होगी. आज यही सब टॉपिक्स पे डिस्कस करने के लिए मेरे साथ प्रेजेंट है मिस लीजा बार्बोरा. शी इज़ अ फाइनेंशियल कोच. शी हैज़ बीन इन द इंडस्ट्री ऑफ पर्सनल फाइनेंस सिंस द लास्ट 20 years. एंड आई एम वेरी श्योर मिस लीजा, आपके इंसाइट्स हमारे इस पॉडकास्ट को बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग बनाने वाले हैं.
Thank you, Zeel.
So
Very
yeah.
happy to be here.
So yeah, I welcome you to this podcast.
Thanks.
Yes. So Miss Lisa, आप 20 years से personal finance में हो, money coaching में हो. How has that shaped your personal philosophy?
Okay. So yes, personal finance for 20 years. Money coaching or financial coaching is slightly newer. Maybe the last 3-4 years. Being in the personal finance industry for so long, of course, it helps because I understand risk, I understand the relationship with return. तो personal money को manage करना थोड़ा easy हो जाता है.
Absolutely.
But even for me, the real eye-opener was when the shift happened towards understanding the emotions behind money, which was the coaching side, and which was something that I initiated in COVID when I trained with a UK-based trainer to become a financial coach. And that's when, you know, the missing pieces kind of started to fall in place. And I had started recently moneypuzzle.in with the idea that was not so much on the coaching side, but that was with the idea that for people it becomes easier to understand कि पैसे कैसे मैनेज करना है, क्या करना है. हम लोग सीधा प्रोडक्ट पे चले जाते हैं, क्या खरीदना है, कहाँ इन्वेस्ट करना है. But the product is the last part of the puzzle. And the idea was to get people to think about the other things around, you know, why you should be investing and how you should think about different assets and where they fit into your money life. And I think coaching ke baad I really found the missing piece, which was to align your money and what you do with your money with your life's values and your life's aspirations. And that's really personal, and that's really what personal finance ultimately is about for everyone.
Absolutely, I agree. You know, हमारे गोल्स के हिसाब से हर कोई इसके पीछे भागता है कि मैं कौन से स्टॉक में इन्वेस्ट करूँ, मैं कौन से म्यूचुअल फंड में इन्वेस्ट करूँ. बट द थिंग इज कि वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि मेरा गोल क्या है, मैं क्या करना चाहती हूँ. दैट विल डिसाइड द रूट, है ना. या सो आपने बहुत सारे कोचिंग की है, आपने बहुत सेशंस लिए हैं. सो इन दैट व्हाट वाज द मिथ दैट यू सॉ द मोस्ट, या कौन से मिसकंसेप्शन थे जो आपने सबसे ज़्यादा ऑब्जर्व किए अपने कैंडिडेट्स में?
Misconception, I think, firstly, practically speaking, मैं बताऊँ आपको, what I find with a lot of people is that we run towards seeking something which has assured या guaranteed. वो हम लोग करते हैं. हम लोग वी आर अफ्रेड कि रिस्क नहीं लेना चाहिए. So that I find to be universal, that people are hesitant to take risk, but they move towards what they perceive as assured and guaranteed returns, often everything has risk. Okay, even your fixed deposit, which is perceived as the most simple, stable, even that has risk. What is the risk there? That you're not getting enough return, and inflation is going to eat the value of your money. वो तो हमारे सबके पैसे के साथ होने वाला है, right?
Right.
And अगर आपको return ही कम मिल रहा है, the risk is that you're not growing your money. You can afford to do that for 6 months in a year, but can you afford to do that for the next 10 years? In 10 years, inflation would have eaten up half the value of your money, right?
Right.
तो अगर आप calculated risk नहीं लोगे, then you will not be able to grow your wealth. And when I say people go towards assured, also ये जो insurance में होता है, that you know you have your money back. उनको लगता है अरे wow, I'm getting my money back. Endowment है, अरे उसमें भी you're getting, you know, you're shown a number.
Right.
So we like to see that number. You know, in our FD we know, अच्छा इतना तो मिलेगा ही. We like to see this number. The problem is in equities you can't see an exact number, right? So
right.
Your mind doesn't adjust to that. I don't know. But insurance, you're seeing the number, but you forget that you're getting that number 25 years later, in some cases 40 years later, and you are giving premium for 20 years if you're getting the money after 40 years. And if you sit down and do the math behind it, you're not making inflation plus, which means if you're not making inflation plus in 40 years, you're losing value. It's a risk.
Right.
And the risk is that you're not, it's not a capital loss that you can see, but you are not going to gain value, and you're actually, if the return is less than inflation, then it is a nominal loss on your capital, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So people don't see that. They just feel कि हाँ ये है तो it's very good. Whereas assets like equity give you the ability to earn inflation plus in 10, 20, 40 years, and that's the way to actually grow wealth.
Right, absolutely. In fact, मैंने कुछ endowment policies के returns निकाले थे कि कितना IRR बन रहा है. It is coming only 5%, 6% max, उससे ज़्यादा नहीं मिलता. जबकि इंडिया का इन्फ्लेशन ही 7% रह चुका है, तो you are not even beating that.
This is not now. This has been the case for decades, right?
Right, absolutely.
It was the case when I started my career 20 plus years ago. But it's in the head. नहीं मिल तो रहा है, but नहीं मिल रहा है. What you're not understanding is that what you cannot see, inflation has eaten up the value of your money. The return you're earning is not even equal to that. Then how are you growing your money? You're not growing your money.
Absolutely.
Money
right.
lying in the bank at 3%, and now we can see bank
reduced
rate
it,
have gone down.
In fact, 2.5 or 2.35 पे recently.
So how
किया
are you
है.
going to make money if you only are going to be afraid कि नहीं दिख तो रहा है बैंक में तो उतना ही दिखेगा आपको, but value has decreased, right? If you leave it in for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Right.
So yeah, that's the biggest thing I find.
So ma'am, you're talking about returns over here, right? बहुत सारे लोगों को ना confusion होता है between XIRR and CAGR.
Okay.
So can you explain that to us?
These are technical terms, and honestly, I feel like obviously you need to know what your portfolio is earning, or what your product is earning. But I'm just going to simplify it very much. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of what these terms mean.
Sure.
CAGR, if you open it up, is compounded annual growth rate. So that just shows you ki what your product is earning. Now you may be invested in the product for 10 years, but वो एक साल में वो 10-year return आप कैसे break down करते हो उसको. So maybe you've invested 10 rupees to begin with, and that becomes 100 rupees in 10 years. So what is the return per year that you have earned? Okay. Why is this important? It is important because you don't invest just in one product or in one asset. आपके पास म्यूचुअल फंड्स भी हैं जो इक्विटी में है, आपके पास प्रॉपर्टी भी है, आपके पास गोल्ड भी है, आपके पास फिक्स डिपॉजिट्स भी हैं. अब एंड ये प्रॉपर्टी में अक्सर होता है दैट somebody will come and say that what, my property has doubled, okay, in 10 years, and value has doubled in 10 years. What does that mean? is it better than what your mutual fund has done? Is it better than what your FD has done? At 7.2%.
Yeah, the rule of 72.
Yeah, it
Right.
doubles, right? Now in 10 years.
Right.
But 7.2%, is that a good return in 10 years? As you were saying, inflation is 6%, right?
Right.
तो आपने 10 साल वो property रखा है, double हो गया है, sure, but value of your money is also just, 100 rupees is worth 55.
Right.
So really, what are we talking about, right? So then it helps in knowing an easier way to call CAGR is annualized return.
कि year on year मैंने कितना earn
Yes,
किया.
so you're comparing that, you're not saying things like this has doubled and that has doubled. The time period matters, but every investment is made for a different time period, right? You could be invested in your FD for 5 years, you could be invested in your mutual fund for 15 years. How do you know how much the contribution of each asset or each product is to your portfolio? You have to break it down to something that is comparable.
Okay.
That's when annualized return or CAGR helps, because then you can say that, look, you know what, I started this investment at this time.
Right.
Again, your start dates for all investments will be different, so your holding periods will be different. So this is a way of kind of standardizing return so that you can say what is working and how it's working and how it's contributing to your portfolio. XIRR is a step further. It actually measures the annualized return, but where cash flows are many in a year.
Like a mutual fund SIP जहाँ पे हर month top up हो रहा है.
टॉप अप भी हो रहा है and maybe you're withdrawing as well, right? तो आपका म्यूचुअल फंड इन्वेस्टमेंट 5 साल से चल रहा है या 10 साल से चल रहा है, आप SIP से कर रहे हैं, but 10 years later or 8 years later you have a goal coming and you withdraw partially, because mutual funds allow you to withdraw partially.
Right.
So you withdraw partially, the return will change because जो units आपने withdraw किए उन पे क्या return है was. So it starts to get a little complicated, right? Because
Right.
आपका पहला SIP जो है जो 10 साल पहले शुरू हुआ है would have earned a different return from your last SIP, which is just a month ago.
Right.
So what is the, how do we summarize that return? So that is what XIRR does for you. It summarizes that return. I think annualized return or CAGR is useful for investors to just kind of see what assets are doing in their portfolio. XIRR is a more accurate way of doing this. It may not be valid for every investment because again, real estate, you're not doing piecemeal. You're going to buy once, you're going to sell
Right.
once, right? So may not apply to everything, but it will apply where there are cash inflows and outflows throughout the life of the investment.
Okay.
Yeah, so people should be aware, but don't get too carried away about what your exact XIRR. XIRR will help you if you have like 5 SIPs in different funds.
Okay.
Then that's a useful measure. But if you're comparing just your equity versus your real estate, or your FD versus your real estate, then it
CAGR
may not
maybe?
be needed. Yeah, I think if investors understand the concept of annualized return, that returns should be seen, you have to standardize it somehow, then that's a good step. Everything else now anyway websites give you just have to click. So you
Yes.
must know that yes, where your investment has several cash inflows, outflows, the right measure of return is XIRR. And definitely we shouldn't anymore be talking about things ये तो मेरा 5 साल में double हो गया and ये तो, because that has no meaning unless you break it down in a
Per
way
year
that's
returns.
understandable.
ओके सो मिस लीजा अभी हम म्यूचुअल फंड्स की बात कर रहे हैं जहाँ पे आपने कहा कि वी कैन डू SIP, वी कैन डू विड्रॉवल्स. आजकल ना एक बहुत ही ट्रेंडिंग टॉपिक चल रहा है कि हाउ कैन वी रीच आवर फर्स्ट 1 crore विद द हेल्प ऑफ म्यूचुअल फंड्स.
You're right, this is being talked about a lot, but the answer is so simple that I feel like कि कुछ तो और बोलना चाहिए. But the answer is really simple. Be regular. Start as early as you can. Rather, the other way around. Start as early as you can and be regular. So I'll just quickly showcase this in terms of numbers, right?
Sure.
If you start with a 1,000 rupee SIP, now that's not hard for anybody to do. हम लोग
Absolutely.
1,000 rupees तो ऐसे ही खर्च हो जाते हैं, right?
बिल्कुल.
At an assumed 15% return, you can if you start at the age of 25, you can have 1.1 crore by the age of 60, right? Very easy thing to do. There's your 1.1 crore, right?
Yeah, just
And
a straight SIP throughout?
yes.
Okay.
Delayed by 10 years. Okay, instead of 25, start at 35. Your corpus will reduce to almost close to 30 lakhs.
Oh, okay.
Okay, delayed by another 10 years, you'll have less than 10 lakhs.
Oh
This is
my
just, we're
God.
talking about 1,000. But you see, the point is, the later you begin, the more you will have to invest per month to achieve
That 1 crore.
yes, that 1 crore goal. It could be 10 crores or it could be any goal. The point is, the later you begin, the more you'll have to spend. The earlier you begin, the longer runway you have, right?
Right.
And the other thing is, you give yourself a long runway anyway to compound, because the real strength of compounding starts coming in after the first 10-15 years. That's when money really starts to expand. Now, the other thing is that the earlier you start, you also give yourself room to make some mistakes and to learn from them, so that by the time you are in your mid 30s, you understand the different products available, you understand the risk dynamics, and you're able to make choices which actually work for you rather than just following what other people are doing. So that's the second benefit of starting early. But there is absolutely nothing else you need to do. When I was younger, or in my mid 20s or whatever, there was no, we were still filling forms. We had to give the 5,000 rupee check. We had to begin like that.
Right.
Now you can begin in half an hour.
Absolutely.
And I don't see that there's any excuse not to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great. So I think 1,000 rupees तो हर कोई afford कर ही सकता है आज के time में भाई, इतना कम कहीं पे भी spend कर देते हैं. There is one more myth surrounding mutual funds. Especially whenever there is an NFO, okay, I know NFOs can be good, they can be bad depending on where they are going to invest. बट लोगों को ये मिथ होता है कि ये तो सिर्फ 10 रुपीज़ का म्यूचुअल फंड है, ये तो चीप है, ये बेटर है, इसको खरीद लो. ऑन द कॉन्ट्ररी, कोई म्यूचुअल फंड होगा जो थोड़े टाइम से एस्टैब्लिश्ड होगा, जिसका NAV प्रोबेबली 500 रुपीज़ 600 रुपीज़ पहुंच गया होगा, तो पीपल विल बी लाइक नहीं ये तो महंगा हो चुका है. सो पीपल मिस रीड NAV. How would you clarify that?
So the absolute NAV is not relevant, because you are investing in a portfolio. So the 1,000 rupees that we are talking about, that goes into a portfolio. What the fund manager is doing is collecting money from a lot of people, right?
Right.
तो उनके पास से 1,000 करके, they have 1 lakh to invest. And then they will buy stocks. They buy 20 different stocks or 30 different stocks, and they allocate that big chunk of money. अगर आपका 1 lakh का pool है और आपने 1,000 दिया है, then you will get the proportionate number of units.
100 units or something.
Now, that will grow, right? Slowly, that was the first time they bought those stocks. Now the value will grow. So let's say the 1 lakh becomes 1.5 lakhs, okay, and you have 100 units. Now, somebody else has 100 units. There's a finite number of units. So 1 lakh, we said 10 rupees, so 10,000 units, right? So the value of that 10,000 units is now 1.5 lakhs. So every unit is worth 15 rupees.
Yeah.
So महंगा is not the right way to see it. वो बढ़ा है, value बढ़ी है, it has grown, and every unit is worth more now. But because mutual funds allow people to buy at any time, somebody is looking at this and saying that, look, मेरे friend को इसमें 50% return मिला है, 10 का 15 हो गया ना, so I want to buy. And they say, oh, but it's 15 already. But to that person buying at 15, it doesn't matter that 10 has moved to 15. It matters that 15 can move to what, right? Because they are buying at 15. Yes, the person who bought earlier and is remaining invested, they get, their money is going to grow more than the person who's come the last. It's the same thing what we were talking about SIP. The first SIP will have more return than the last SIP. But the person who's buying at 15, it's not relevant the price you're paying. What is relevant is what is the expectation कि वो 15 कितना बढ़ेगा.
Right.
And that is more important
Right.
rather than anything else. So this is definitely a myth that a 10 rupee, especially it happens with new fund offers, is going to be, अगर वो 10 का 12 हुआ and a 500 rupee NAV is a better performing portfolio, and 10 का 2 is 20%, 500 का वो उतने ही period में, let's say it becomes
600.
750 or something, you know, so that's like a 50% return.
Right.
So that's a better performing fund. I mean, these numbers
Right.
are obviously exaggerated and for the sake of simplicity, but so you see, it doesn't matter whether it's
Right.
10 or 500, it is what the fund is going to do next.
Right, absolutely. So like we said, जैसे हमने NAV डिस्कस किया, वैसे आई एम श्योर म्यूचुअल फंड सिलेक्ट करने के बहुत सारे पैरामीटर्स होंगे. हर कोई स्टॉक के लिए बात करता है कि पी रेशियो देखो, अर्निंग्स देखो. जब मैं एक म्यूचुअल फंड सिलेक्ट करना चाहती हूँ, व्हाट आर द की मेट्रिक्स दैट आई शुड सी बिफोर बाइंग अ म्यूचुअल फंड?
I think we are talking majorly about equity oriented funds. So I'll
Okay,
stick
yes.
to that because obviously it changes if you're talking about debt funds.
Right.
But if you're looking at equity funds, सबसे पहले लोग देखते क्या है? Return.
रिटर्न्स देखते हैं.
Yeah. आप the problem is that people look at the last 1 year return, या पिछले 6 महीने में क्या किया है, या you know what is the popular segments kind of. But that's the worst thing to do, because अगर आप कोई भी कैटेगरी ले लो म्यूचुअल फंड्स में या कोई भी फंड्स ले लो, नो फंड डिलीवर्स द बेस्ट रिटर्न ईयर आफ्टर ईयर आफ्टर ईयर. अदरवाइज और फंड्स होते ही नहीं मार्केट में, एक ही फंड होता है जो सबसे अच्छा कर रहा है. सो वॉट यू नीड टू डू इज रियली लुक एट स्लाइटली लॉन्गर पीरियड फर्स्ट. सो परफॉर्मेंस में आप एटलीस्ट 5 years if not longer. Also, you need to look at something called rolling returns. Okay, this is where things get a little bit more technical, but I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible. Now, rolling returns. So when we look at returns, right? When I say last 1 year return, I'm sitting today and I'm going to calculate return from 1 year ago. So today we are on the 25th of April. So I'll take 26th April 2024 का NAV and I'll see आज का NAV and वो मेरा 1 year return हो गया, right?
Right.
But that is just the return basis one date. And we saw this a few days ago that the benchmark index, what we call market, fell by 3.5% in a day.
Right.
Right? तो अगर वो मैंने एक दिन पहले उससे रिटर्न लिया होता, that 3.5% one single day fall would be captured in my 1 year. अगर उसके एक दिन बाद लूँ, वो 3.5% वो कैप्चर नहीं हुआ उसमें. ऐसे ही काफ़ी पीरियड्स होते हैं, you know, there could be weeks of correction, there could be weeks of extraordinary rise in the market, and if you take, you know, return based on one day, it can get disturbed by these kind of things. So what we suggest is that you should take rolling returns which measure the return on every single day for the period you want. तो मैं 25th April को 1 year return देखती हूँ, मैं 26th April को 1 year return देखती हूँ, मैं 27th April को, 28th, like this. For the entire year, I'm looking at 1 year return. Except don't look at 1 year return, look at 5 year return. Okay?
Okay.
So just like you would look at 1 year return every day, you don't do that. You actually look at 5 year return. And I can say that, okay, sitting today, let me take the last 1 year, okay? So from 26th April to 2024 to 25th April today, what has been the 5 year return on every day?
That will give me a more realistic picture.
That will give you a more consistent kind of, it will tell you consistency. Is the fund consistently able to deliver returns which are beating the benchmark? Because obviously if you're investing in an active fund, you want returns which are beating the benchmark. So is the fund able to give benchmark beating returns consistently? And we're talking about long-term returns, remember, not 1 year returns over, you know, whatever. You can do this for 2 years, you can do this, you can check the rolling 5 year rolling return for 2 years, you can check it for 3 years. But basically you are checking the consistency.
Right.
Rather than just return on one
Particular day. Right.
So that is firstly important. Obviously, people are obsessed with return, so I begin with return. Second thing is you have to also see what type of equity fund it is. Okay, there can be various types of equity funds.
Right.
If you're just starting out, maybe it makes sense to have something a bit more diversified and a simpler fund, like, you know, large cap, mid cap, small cap, which are basically diversified. You have to understand risk also. Market capitalization is one metric of risk. Large cap pertains to companies which are, you know, the biggest companies in their industries, market leaders, etc. So the risk when we talk about risk in equity, we are talking really about volatility. Kitna upar niche jayega. The risk is slightly limited because there are many people buying those stocks which are going to be in the fund, and the price discovery is good. जैसे ही आप थोड़ा उसमें, you know, you start moving to funds which invest in companies which are not so well known, so mid cap, small cap, the risk starts to increase because क्या होता है कि firstly there are very few numbers of those stocks available for people to buy, and information is limited. So any small input, news, this, that can impact the share price a lot. तो volatility बढ़ जाती है.
Right.
May still be a good quality fund, but in the interim आप देखोगे कि आपका पैसा जो है वो बहुत ज़्यादा ऊपर नीचे कर रहा है. If you're a new investor, that can start to make you feel anxious, right? So we begin slow. You see what kind of risk the fund holds. There are sector funds also which are even more concentrated, and hence there is that risk there. So just you have to kind of ascertain the risk that you are willing to take in the fund. Then of course you have to see the pedigree of the fund manager, of the asset manager as well. तो एक तो चीज़ हो गया fund manager जो individual है, जो fund manage कर रहे हैं, उनका experience कितना है, and you know what kind of investment style they have. There's a lot of literature around it. Mutual funds continue to publish a lot about their fund managers and about their funds and their fund management style. And also asset manager जो है, उनके process क्या है, उनका रिस्क मैनेजमेंट प्रोसेस क्या है, उनका इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रोसेस क्या है, ये भी फैक्ट शीट्स में आता है, उनके वेबसाइट्स में है. देयर इज लॉट ऑफ लिटरेचर. थोड़ा सा आपको ये काम करना पड़ेगा.
राइट.
सो डू अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ दिस. देयर आर स्मॉलर थिंग्स लाइक exit loads, expense ratios, which really you want to see that they are within the average of the category. They're not deal breakers in any way,
right?
But you need to know that they are within the average of the category,
the peers, or comparison wise.
So lastly I would say that you have to look at your own requirements also. Why are you investing? So अगर आप fund choice के लिए जा रहे हो, and your goal is ki I want to plan my destination wedding in 2 years, and you invest in a small cap fund, it's a mismatch,
right?
So that also is needed, which is really more in your control than a product feature per se. Risk metrics, we were talking about risk in a very simple way, but there are more deeper ways of analyzing risk, which again are published in the fact sheet. So familiarize yourself with a little bit of those as well.
So we say that कि कम से कम अगर आप 5 years के लिए रुक सकते हो तो ही आपको कोई भी इक्विटी फंड में डालना चाहिए, be it large, mid, flexi, whatever, but कम से कम 5 years है तो ही आप डालो. अगर आपका 2-3 year का गोल है तो it is better कि you play safe via debt or something. Absolutely. Yeah. So आपने स्टार्टिंग में कहा था about risk reward also, that we have to see our own risk parameters. वैसे ही म्यूचुअल फंड्स के भी risk parameters होते हैं. जैसे कि हम शार्पे रेशियो, लाइक इफ़ यू गो टू एनी वेबसाइट, देयर आर सो मेनी वेबसाइट्स जो अभी म्यूचुअल फंड के पैरामीटर्स शो करते हैं. सो बहुत कॉमनली मुझे शार्पे दिखा है, सॉर्टिनो दिखा है, अल्फा दिखा है, बीटा दिखा है, एंड नाउ आई हैव रेड कि इन्फॉर्मेशन रेशियो इज़ ऑल्सो मेड मैंडेटरी कि एवरी फंड मैनेजर विल हैव टू डिस्क्लोज ऑल दीज पैरामीटर्स. सो कैन यू ब्रॉडली गाइड अस कि हमें ये पैरामीटर्स में क्या देखना चाहिए या कैसे अंडरस्टैंड करना चाहिए?
Yeah, so beta is the simplest. That will show you कि वो मार्केट से कैसे कंपेयर होता है आपका फंड. तो अगर मार्केट इतना रिस्की है तो आपका फंड उससे कितना ज़्यादा रिस्की है, कितना कम रिस्की है. तो अगर बीटा आपका 1 से ज़्यादा है, दैट मीन्स योर फंड इज़ riskier than the market. The higher it is, the more riskier it is. Now, the others, Sharpe, Sortino, information ratio, these are all ways of ascertaining what we call risk adjusted return, which is a great thing and which is what investors should be aware of, but these are slightly technical. Okay, there's a very technical difference, for example, between Sharpe ratio and information ratio, but essentially what all these are telling you is कि per unit of risk आपको कितना return मिल रहा है,
right.
but not just pure return, excess return. Sharpe ratio में वो excess calculate होता है as against a
RF
risk-free rate, right? So what is a risk-free rate? But is the interest you can or the return you can get without taking any risk, which what we classify as government security. So government security में आपको, because that is risk free, right? आपका government is guaranteeing your return. तो उसमें कितना मिल रहा है versus आपके fund में कितना मिल रहा है per unit of risk that the fund is taking. No point getting into the calculation of it because it's people won't understand. Again, higher it is, the better it is, and what it shows, anything above 1, for example, for a Sharpe ratio is a good thing.
Anything above 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
What it will show you is how is the fund performing versus, where you can put your money without risk. So you want, obviously, that the Sharpe ratio is good. Information ratio is slightly different because there you're not doing an asset level comparison ki, equity mein dala, then what kind of benefit I'm getting versus a risk-free rate. There you are comparing against the benchmark. So the same thing we are doing per unit of risk, how is the fund performing versus the benchmark for a, whatever period you are defining. Now that is more relevant when you want to see how your active fund is performing.
Right.
Is your fund manager, who you are paying a fee to, able to consistently on a risk adjusted basis beat the benchmark or not and justify the fees that they are paying? Okay, so there's a slight difference in why you would look at a Sharpe versus a information. Sortino ratio is just a derivative of the Sharpe really. उसमें आप measure कर रहे हैं कि per unit of loss, क्योंकि क्या होता है markets up भी जाते हैं down भी जाते हैं and उसमें when the downtrend is happening, so per unit of loss, what is your fund, how is your fund performing against the risk-free asset? So these are all ways of ascertaining, and higher the better, at least above 1 to chahiye.
Right.
So that's what people can keep in mind, I guess.
Okay, good, fair enough. So these are very volatile times as well in the market. ऐसे टाइम पे people are confused कि भाई मैं इक्विटी में डाल दूँ या कैश होल्ड करूँ या गोल्ड में डाल दूँ. There's sort of chaos in the market. So what type of category can be suitable for anyone who is ready to hold for say next 3 to 5 years के लिए कोई hold करने ready है and they are having some money with them, तो वो फिलहाल कौन सी category में रख सकते हैं which is good enough to hold for the next few years?
See, I say it's very hard to say, and honestly the thing is कि everyone should have a diversified portfolio, right? You must have different assets. Every asset plays a different role. As we have been discussing equity, उसका role है wealth creation, to grow your wealth. There are investments in debt. Now it could be deposits, it could be debt funds or whatever. Their role is different. The role is to give you a stable return where the focus is on capital safety rather than maximizing return or creating wealth. Then there is gold, which is gold has done superbly in the last 2 years, but the role it plays is a hedge against inflation and uncertainty, right? Every asset has, and of course there's property. Property is also more wealth creation, but then it has a different dynamic because it's a chunky investment and the paperwork, it's a physical asset and all of that. But every asset, what I was saying, it has a different role to play. Now, at all points in time, you should have different assets.
Right.
Because like we didn't know that this tariff war is going to happen and suddenly all this is going to... Now, looking back, you'll be happy if you have some stable return assets, some goal, because that is the cushion your equity portfolio will have. And if you have goals which are, coming up in the next year or year and a half, then those stable return assets gold is hedging, and those stable return assets can actually help you achieve those goals. If everything was in equity, you would be regretting it because, right? So it doesn't matter where we are at every point in time. You need to have different assets because every asset plays a different role, and ideally match how much of what asset you have to what you want to achieve with that money. And if you're coming closer to so say when you started, you have only long-term goals, right? So you have put bulk of your money in equity, but time has passed and your first long-term goal is coming up in the next year. Regardless of what the markets are doing, you must take out money that you need for that goal and put it in stable return, because we don't know how equities will perform on a daily basis, right?
Absolutely.
And so let your sort of decision of where you're investing be guided by what you're doing with your money. And definitely there are different assets and they can play different roles in your portfolio. Ideally, you should have them again at all points in time. It's too late to think now कि मुझे क्या करना चाहिए था और अब क्या करूं. Align it with what you want to achieve with your money rather than just looking at return.
Right, absolutely. Miss Lisa, we can see that now females are so educated. They are there in all the fields of sciences, everywhere. But आज भी मुझे कहीं ना कहीं लगता है कि females ना money की discussion से बहुत comfortable नहीं है. मतलब now I'm also in finance, but मेरी खुद की cousins होंगी जो मुझसे इतनी money talks नहीं करेगी. They won't be so comfortable. Why is this way? Why are females not so comfortable talking about money?
Yeah, it's a very tough one, honestly. I find it as well. Women don't want to talk about money. And as you know, I've published my book, Money and Her. So this addresses some of this issue. And it's basically a nudge for women to actually start talking about money. But if you think about it, in a casual dinner, right, or a party or whatever, a lot of times men will get together and they'll talk about, "Arey, kaun sa stock kharida? Arey, kya kiya? Kahan invest kiya?" Ye. Women don't get into those kind of conversations. Often when I meet somebody new in a party and they ask me, "What do you do?" and I say, I work in the space of personal finance. Invariably, the response I get is, "Wow, we don't get numbers. हमें समझ में नहीं आता है, बड़ा अच्छा आप करते हैं." And I think that's the starting point for women. When you are already convinced कि आपको नहीं समझ में आता है, you are telling yourself कि आगे भी नहीं आएगा. So earning is the easy thing because you're working in a space जो आपको समझ में आता है. So you are, you could be an artist, you could be a media person, you could be in HR, in corporate, or you like doing the work, you get some money for it. But in your head, you've convinced yourself that I don't know what to do with that money. So for women, I think just that it's a mindset issue, not for all women, but majority, yes. There is the, whole mental block around money. Yes, I'm very good at HR. I'm not good at this. So that is, that's what stops most women. The second thing is life stage, right? Women are built in a different way. And, of course, when as you grow older, you have a family, you'll have children. There is a responsibility around caretaking, which a lot of women will raise their hands for and say that, what, this is my responsibility, I'll do this. But in doing that, and there's nothing wrong with it, but in doing that, what they're also doing is releasing their responsibility around financial awareness and independence. And that is not required. Yes, caretaking is a responsibility that somebody has to take up, right, of a family of young children because they can't do it themselves. But doesn't mean that you let go of this financial understanding. The other thing I hear from women is that यार कितना करें, घर पे भी करना पड़ता है, काम पे भी करना पड़ता है, खाना भी बनाना पड़ता है, बच्चों को भी देखना पड़ता है, अब ये भी इन्वेस्टमेंट भी संभालें. So it's not, again, it is not, I feel like women think it's an additional job. It's not an additional job. It's basic hygiene. Every woman is not born knowing how to cook, right?
Right.
But आप सीखते हो.
जी.
Right? Because you have children, you want your children to have healthy food, you have a family, you want your family to have... So you equip yourself with whatever is... Every woman is not born knowing how to manage a household, but she learns, right?
Right.
Why can you not learn how to manage money? It does not mean that you have to alone do everything. It means you need to participate in financial decision making that impacts your family. It means you have to sit with your partner when you are making those choices on where to invest, when you are making a choice to take a loan or not to take a loan. Participate in that with the full knowledge and awareness of what it means financially for your family. Why should your partner alone decide that should I put this year's bonus for an investment or should I put it for a down payment? You can contribute to that discussion, right? Even if you are not earning, even if you don't understand everything, if you don't want to take on extra work, at least understand the basics of investments, risk, return. And come on, there are advisors. Get an advisor on board, but you need to have the basic knowledge so that you're asking your advisor the right questions, so that the decisions that are finally taken are beneficial to you in a way that it enhances your life. And it's not just some decision you're taking around what you're doing with your money. So Money and Her addresses this in a way where women, I've done it in a story format where women have taken charge of their money decisions, and sometimes they're pushed to a corner. It's not always by choice, but they do it very well once they're pushed to a corner. तो पहले क्यों नहीं किया? Why wait till that catastrophe happens in your life and you have to do this? Why not do it from the beginning? Again, it's not rocket science. You just need to equip yourself a little bit. But first, get rid of this idea that I cannot do it, okay? So the idea behind Money and Her was just to showcase these stories of where women have taken charge of their money choices, their money decisions. Where they invest finally is a result of what they want to do with their money. But the fact that they are, participating in that decision making, regardless of their life circumstance, I want other women to understand that there is no excuse. It's like brushing your teeth. This is what a friend of mine said to me after she was pushed to a corner, and she said, Lisa, today I realize it's like brushing your teeth. Everyone needs to do it, regardless of gender. Men are pushed to do it. Women take a back seat, and that's, that needs to change.
Right. Fair enough. So how can a female start that? There are so many females I know जो non-finance के हैं, जैसे आपने कहा, they may be artists, they can be good at what they are doing. How can they start their basic financial learning? जो भी हमें सीखने की ज़रूरत है कि भाई पैसे हैं तो कहीं पे तो इन्वेस्ट करो, बैंक की FD करो, RD करो, कुछ start. How can they learn it?
So step one obviously is saving, right? And I find a lot of young people now don't even believe in that. It's like, okay, payday loans and all of those kind of things. But we kind of sitting today, we are too consumed by our current, what I want, how I want to look, how I want to project myself, what is the experience I want today, whether it's travel or whatever. So we use our money towards our current. But financial well-being in its true sense is catering to your present, but also understanding that there is a financial future which requires to be secure, and taking out a little bit from your present and putting it aside for that financial future. That is one thing. The other thing, as we spoke, is inflation. The value of your money is only going to go down because of inflation. So you need to invest so that you keep growing the value of your money. There is no certainty that you'll have your job or you'll earn the same in the future as well. Anything can happen, as we have seen in the last 5 years only. We've had so many things, from COVID to geopolitical wars to now this tariff issue. So anything can happen. So you have to safeguard your financial future and your money against inflation. So for that, investing is necessary, but step one is first save. Invest करने के लिए, yes, you need a little bit of knowledge, but today there are so many ways to get that knowledge. You can go on YouTube on a trusted source from a trusted kind of financial services industry player, where you can understand some of these nuances. There are investor education programs run by mutual fund houses which are pretty neutral, and you can learn from those, or you can get in touch with a coach, a financial coach. Job is to kind of take you through some of these basic understanding of how to manage money. Then it's very simple. Then once you have understood nuances of return and risk, then you can just open an account online, and within half an hour you can start investing. Not necessarily in equity. You can invest in deposits, you can invest in debt funds, you can invest in gold, if for that matter. And the best thing is that you don't need to put in lakhs. You can begin with just a few thousand.
Right.
So it's very simple, but थोड़ा सा initiative तो हमको लेना पड़ेगा.
Right. थोड़ा education, थोड़ा learning. Right.
Yeah.
So very well. Miss Lisa, आपने कहा कि आपने इस book में you have spoken to ladies. They were pushed into a corner and they had to take charge of their finances. What type of stories are there? Can you share one of the stories with us?
Not all stories are about being pushed into a corner, but when I do say that, things like death of your partner, who is the main earning member of your family. See, death is an extremely difficult thing to cope with, okay? On top of that, if you have, if you've never involved yourself in financial issues, things can get really, really complicated. Divorce. There's a divorce story in the book where the lady is very well earning all the time. I mean, she's earned entire life, and yet when it comes time, see, divorce can happen for any reason, right? And you don't know. I mean, marriages, they say, are made in heaven, but sometimes things go wrong, right? And when that happens, and you've been earning all your life, but you realize that in this event of divorce, you have actually nothing, no savings, and you have no claim to any of the family assets. I mean, you read the story for that, but what do? You are, you could be 35 plus, you could be 40 plus, and you have to restart. Little bit of financial prudence would have helped, right?
Right.
There are also great stories of women who have kept charge of their money, regardless of life circumstance, health being one big life circumstance. But there are women who have not used health as an excuse to let go of their financial independence. Starting your venture, there are stories of women whose ventures have almost, or rather completely collapsed in COVID. They've always kept charge, but then, how do you again build that? What are the mistakes that have been made? And they're making their choices by themselves, right? Rather than putting it on somebody else and saying कि मुझे तो नहीं आता था, अब देखो क्या हो गया, kind
In
of
fact,
thing.
I have seen stories where females, they have lost their partners, they have lost their spouses, and then they have like, अरे अब मैं क्या करूँ, मुझे पता नहीं चल रहा है. I met one of the lady and she was depressed कि मेरे husband suddenly pass away हो गए, इतने सालों में मैंने कभी कुछ सीखा ही नहीं है, and now she is under panic कि पता नहीं मैं मेरी life कैसे आगे का गुजारा करूँगी. Because they don't know कि उनके husband के पास क्या है, कितना है.
And we have heard hundreds of stories where after death they realize कि loans कितनी थी. Had you helped your husband, see, we assume that men को तो आता ही होगा how to manage money. Why? Maybe they also don't know, and maybe by assuming this, it's not us, it's how society has done it, right? Society has kind of pushed men in a direction where they may or money, nobody is born knowing how to manage money, right? You have to learn. Maybe some men are also uncomfortable and don't know, but they cannot admit it because society has made it that men should know this. And because they cannot admit it and they have never spent time learning it, they find themselves in these difficult positions of having taken too many loans or being too much in debt to manage their family, okay? And they suddenly die, let's assume.
Right.
Then the lady is left with, firstly, no knowledge. Secondly, lot of loan to repay. So you're pushing men also in the deep end sometimes because some men may not know this and they may find it really hard to swim in this whole world of money. If their spouse is better at it and she actually steps up, imagine you may not have this situation where you find yourself in this debt trap because the spouse has taken initiative and has balanced the equation, right?
Right.
Sometimes it happens that your spouse passes away and they are the ones who are taking care of the money matters, and relatives come in. And there is life insurance or whatever, and the relatives are like, what, this belongs to us. And if the lady doesn't know anything, how is she going to get herself out of it? And if all that money is coming out, ya bank mein rakha hai, ya business mein tied up hai, and there is no annuity that's linked to her, what is she going to do? And these are real life things that happen all the time, especially in business families, when there's a lot of ambiguity कि किसका पैसा है किसका नहीं है. तो कुछ अगर annuity उनके नाम से नहीं है, now annuity is not the best earning or best return product, but it's a sure shot. And if somebody's husband passes away, then at least कुछ तो आ रहा है.
I have even heard there is something called as Married Women Property Act, जो शायद married women को protect करता है या something.
Yeah, so this is of course a great thing for women. And say, just as an example, if the husband is the main earning member and there's a life insurance policy that gets triggered because of an untimely death, then, and if that policy is kind of registered under MWP, आपने उसको किया है, then the wife, अगर wife is the nominee, ये सब भी देखना पड़ेगा कि आपने wife को nominee किया है कि नहीं, then the wife and the children are entitled to the proceeds of the policy. So it is something that's there to protect women. The law has many things actually. If the woman is living in the marital house, then you can't, in the event of divorce or whatever, you can't, force them out and all of that. So ये अच्छी चीज़ें हैं for women to know, but say it is there, okay? And coming back to the discussion on managing money, and she does get the money, right? Of the policy. Now what? Who is she going to go to if she doesn't know what to do with it herself, right? And say some relative comes to her, and again this happens routinely,
right?
And says कि अच्छा आपको ये insurance का पैसा तो मिल गया है, अब आप क्या करोगे? चलो, I'll help you. And we all hope that each and every relative, each and every time this happens, the intention is right, but sometimes it's not. And that's why, while the law is there to protect women, unless women also take the initiative to understand what they want to do with their money, it'll work sometimes and it'll not work sometimes, depending on who's around you.
Right, absolutely. So great, ma'am. If you have to recommend 3 books to the audience कि अगर आपको money के बारे में learn करना है, सीखना है, which are the 3 books that you will suggest to the audience कि आप ये read कीजिए, आपका financial learning start होगा for a fresher or someone who is very skeptical to learn personal finance?
Yeah. So for the Indian audience, definitely Monica Hallen's Let's Talk Money is a great place to start.
Okay.
It's simple and it covers all the basic things you need to do with your money.
Okay.
And it gives you the practical advice, right? I ask people to pick up Money and Her as well, because there is an element of, as I spoke to you, it's a nudge to women but there is also a lot for men, because when we talk about women and financial independence, it comes across as a challenge to men. And people feel ki acha, if men can do it, so can I. But that is not the conversation that works. You need it to be collaborative. So there is male perspective in the book, and really it's something that will help households take charge of their money by women coming forward. So it's really about women coming forward to understand money matters, and that helps not just them but their entire household. And then the obvious there's the old book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which was excellent, and it helped me a lot in understanding the nuances. It's a very old book, but it's relevant still. And Psychology of Money, I think, by
Psychology of Money,
Morgan
yes.
Housel, yeah.
Morgan Housel.
These are all simple books, simply written, but we are talking about two aspects: the practical and the emotional, the psychology. Both have to be covered.
Okay, great, amazing. So well, I'm sure मेरे audience ने आज बहुत कुछ सीखा होगा about money, management, psychology. In fact, I would recommend all of my female friends to watch this podcast specifically for this topic. So thank you very much, Ms. Lisa, for being here with us on this podcast.
Thank you, Zeel. My pleasure.
Yeah. So well, my dear audience, I hope आपने आज का हमारे ये podcast enjoy किया हो. आपको क्या सबसे अच्छा लगा? Please comment में बताइए हमें, and please do not forget to subscribe to our channel. And I will see you all in our next podcast.